Construction loans made easy.
Mike, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time.
No problem. Thank you for having me on.
You're welcome. So we're going to talk about insurance, and it's one of those topics in the construction loan and construction piece that most people aren't too excited to talk about, and but it's a very, very important piece. Really, insurance for all parts of our life. Usually, I'm sure even the insurance guy doesn't like to pay for insurance, but we recognize that it is something that we really need. You only need it when you really need it, right? Until then, it's just a bill. When we talk about homeowners insurance and construction, and we'll talk about builder's risk, I think there's some real important topics to talk about around that, and we'll get into those. I guess let's start with talking a little bit about builder's risk, what it is, and then and contrast that to what sort of insurance maybe the builder has. Because a lot of times I'll chat with a client about getting insurance and they'll say, oh, the builder has that. So maybe start with that.
Yeah, certainly. So builder's risk policy in general, and just to keep it very simple, and I express this to just about every client I deal with your team or anyone else the like. It's to think about it. It's like a homeowner's policy. It really is. A lot of the same coverages apply, but the key differences in this case is the insurance is assuming a couple things. One, obviously, it's going to be an active job site because of builder's risk. It's for either undergoing major renovation or you're doing a ground up new build. So that's one of the major components. The other one is typically, not always, but typically, you're assuming the home is going to be vacant during the construction process. So those, I would say, are probably the two main points that differentiate a builder's risk policy versus a homeowner's policy. Now, beyond that, I mean, if you're going through this loan process, even get a regular mortgage for a homeowner's policy for a new home, you are getting insurance to protect arguably one of your largest assets you'll have in your entire life. I mean, there's really not many things that are going to cost more than your home. So from a purchaser standpoint, and also the bank, I mean, you're protecting yourself in the event something goes terribly wrong. So,
which is why we require
it. Exactly. And even more so with the builder's risk, because there's a lot more variables that come into play that can cause a major claim to happen. So that's why it's so.
And of course, so the homeowner is going to get either, and we'll talk about this a little further, a homeowner's policy that covers construction for a smaller project or builder's risk for a larger project or new build. Builders will carry their own insurance. And I think that's where, when I chat with clients during the construction loan process, they'll have questions regarding what type of insurance they need versus what the builder has. And the builder is going to carry liability, and in some cases, workman's compensation insurance. I guess workman's comp insurance is more if they have a staff or they hire, they have a staff of people. But their liability insurance, maybe can you just generally and broadly contrast what a builder's liability insurance would cover versus a homeowner's builder's risk insurance?
Yeah. So I would say in a lot of ways, it'll cover about the same thing. Now, there's a reason why I personally recommend the client going and getting their own, and it's called premise liability for the purchaser, getting the builder's risk. But to back it up to what the builder has, they have general liability insurance. That is to cover them in the event that there's any claim, accident, legal matter that comes about where someone's injured. And we're specifically talking about someone that's, one, not the homeowner in most cases, and two, not one of the employees or subcontractors the builder hires to help with the job. So we're talking maybe someone in the neighborhood is taking a walk down the street and I don't know. Think of maybe they're unloading a bunch of material and someone ends up getting injured because of something the employees of the builder did. Something that keeping it kind of vague, but you get the gist of what I'm getting at. It was something that they were found negligent on. So that's where that liability insurance comes into play. Now, for a um, client that's building the home or going under the renovation, I always recommend getting a premise liability. So it's specific for that property. Whereas the builders, it follows from wherever he's working. This premise liability is set up directly, specifically for that project. And it's going to cover the clients in the event that there's any sort of injury. Builders risks or construction sites do have a higher likelihood of people that are breaking in after hours and either purposely going to damage stuff or just doing it on a dare or prank. But the sad fact is that if they get injured on that job site that was even locked up, it still could come back to the client in a lawsuit and they could be found at fault. And to take it a step further, I always say it's better safe than sorry to get the premise liability insurance because you don't know if that builder of yours remembered to pay his premiums. So
Absolutely.
better safe than sorry.
Lenders will require proof of liability insurance with the builder. They have the builder add the bank as on the mortgagee policy as a mortgagee, additional mortgagee. So there's some protection there that the client has, but
Yeah.
to your point, you want to make sure that that you're recovered for liability. At the end of the day, just like you hear many stories, you're not going to be responsible, but it doesn't mean you won't be kind of layered into the lawsuit. So having that explicit protection is really, really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. I agree.
When you think about the builder's risk policy, think about the different scenarios, whether it be theft or whether it be water damage, fire, all that sort of stuff. What is covered? Are the items just that are attached to the home? Think about a new build, right? Starting from foundation up. What is covered? Is it stuff that's just within the home itself? Could it be on site? Could it be on the way? What sort of scenarios and what sort of things are covered with a builder's risk policy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that's another part of what makes a builder's risk policy unique is not only are you going to cover the material that's already been put in place and installed. So anything from your copper, which is always a big thing for people to come in and try and steal, but also for that property that's in transit or in a temporary holding facility. You can obtain coverage for that for that material in the event it's damaged or stolen. So that's another aspect of that builder's risk policy that does differ from homeowners. But yes, everything you mentioned should be covered under there, um, from the drywall to any of the wood that's being stored to piping, etc. That's already been put in place. So yes,
And I would imagine certainly the things that are in transit may be covered with the builder's policy. The builder may take responsibility, but it sounds like the builder's risk gives you that added protection just in case it's not covered.
yeah. It typically with most policies, there's a sub limit to that amount for property in transit. I mean, if you really wanted to keep going down the road on this, you could argue that probably the transportation company or the facility that's providing that building material would be on the hook as well for some of that. But again, we're really not trying to leave it up to chance when we put one of these policies together. We want to make sure the person that is building the home or undergoing major renovation is just taken care of from every aspect because again, it's one of your largest purchases you're ever going to have. Why do you want to go through the stress and headache of now trying to fight a legal battle over material that was lost or damaged? So,
For sure. For sure. And
yep.
one of the areas of insurance, I guess we could think about builder's risk just broadly if we back up a little bit, just a policy that covers the home during construction, whether that is a kitchen remodel or whether it's a brand new build and anything in between. Clients should have, and if they're getting a loan, the lender's going to require that they have insurance in place. Where is that break point? You also mentioned vacancy as well. Where is that break point between the homeowner's policy? And we'll talk about costs here in a second as well. But a lot of clients that I chat with when we have the conversation about needing insurance, most homeowners, if they already own the home, have an insurance policy in place, a standard homeowner's policy. And the first question they say is, does my insurance cover it? So maybe we could start there. And what's you think about your standard insurance companies out there, and somebody's going to do a construction project. How do they know if the project that they're going to do is covered under their policy? What should they be looking for? I do get a sense that some clients are kind of on the line there on whether it is covered or not. And if something happened, they may not be covered. Because I think broadly, I think we can agree a builder's risk is going to be on balance a little more than a standard homeowner's policy, right?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, what I would say, best practice would be talk with your insurance agent, or whoever your rep is. Talk to them first, have that honest conversation, because most people in the industry are just going to be looking out for your best interest. At that point, they could do a little more digging. I would say most insurance policies, like if you own a home and let's say you're updating a bathroom, you're doing it yourself or something like that. This is where you get in a bit of a gray area. If you're doing it yourself and you're being the weekend warrior, usually you're going to be able to find coverage under your regular homeowner's policy. It's usually not until you get into like over 30 days of an active construction site that there's some policy language there that would start excluding coverage. But again, it's where I would recommend talk to your insurance agent or whoever your rep is, have that conversation with them. It's going to be a free conversation anyways. Just make sure you're covering yourself. So that's the biggest thing. If you're talking about a kitchen remodel where it's going to be a little more intricate there and it's going to be an active job site, I mean, that's when you want to start looking at a builder's risk policy. We could do them as short as 3 months. And those policies, depending on how big of a job it is, we can get them to go well over a year, depending on where it is. So there's room for everyone, is what I'm getting at. So we can find something
And
for it.
The home being vacant's a big deal too, right?
Huge, huge.
Is because I have had some clients tell me, they were going to use their homeowner's policy, but they had a conversation with their agent, told them that, we're going to be vacating the house and renting for 6 months elsewhere. And then that's where really it became a situation where they needed to get a builder's risk policy. I guess I would assume that's just because the amount of risk there when the homeowner is not in the home.
Exactly. When there's a vacancy, your likelihood of a claim going up, it jumps dramatically. There's also a lot of policy language. Again, it's going to vary from company to company, so I'm hesitant to give you an exact number. But if we're talking more than a couple weeks here, you're really looking at potentially violating the policy if it's a standard homeowner's HO3 policy. And there's a claim that happens, you might not have coverage because you didn't switch it to the proper vacant property form
Right.
for doing it. So that's correct.
So while it can be an extra expense, it's certainly something that you don't want to find out you don't have coverage for at the end. And you had mentioned 3 months builder's risk policy. I guess let's chat a little bit about that. As I understand it, most, if not all, builder's risk policies are not refundable, whereas a standard homeowner's policy, if generally everybody's on annual renewals, and if you sell your home 6 months in, you'll generally get a refund for the unused portion. Builder's risk, does it work the same way or is it different?
Not in all cases. I would say it tends to lean towards that's going to be a sunk cost in most cases. And you just have to plan for that and essentially accept it in most cases. Now, there are scenarios where there can be money recouped. It's not always the case. Definitely not in a 3 month policy. That's going to be fully earned for that for the shortest amount of time. But if we're talking about a full blown 12-month policy, so similar structure to a homeowner's policy, and the property limit or the dwelling itself is at a certain limit, there are cases for like a proration coming back.
Can I assume if you were to go with the same company for a homeowner's policy that that might give you a little more leverage and be able to take those remaining funds and carrying it over, or is that not a thing?
So yes, I would say in most cases that when I set up builder's risk policies, I I tend to use two specific companies for them, either based on the coverages provided or length of time I'm allowed to carry a home on a policy. That's really the biggest part of it. Um, so yes, there is one case that you are explaining where if I went to a standard carrier, wrote a builder's risk, but it's got to fit into like a um,
Right.
very
So don't expect.
parameters for it to work. At that point, then I could go to billing and have that money rolled over into a regular homeowner's policy. But otherwise, what would happen was uh, once you're ready to move in the home and we cancel out the builder's risk, there will be about roughly a 30-day turnaround between when the cancellation goes in, the billing department remits a check back out to us, and we get the money back to the insured. So yeah, usually there's a lag in it. It's
And let's
perfect science, but they do get the
right.
money back.
And let's go the other way. Builder tells you that we'll be done in 12 months. There's absolutely no way it's going to go longer than that.
Yeah.
Probably be 10 months. And now it's going to take 14 months. And you bought a 12-month builder's risk policy. So is that a scenario where you're just looking to buy like a 3 month, an additional 3 months? Is it? Tell me how that scenario tends to play out.
So in that case, when they say it's not going to go over 12 months, I usually joke and say plan for 15.
Right.
So in that scenario, that's the toughest one. Most cases, when we come up for renewal in dealing with a bank for a builder's risk, it still has to be paid in full for the most part. If we're able to, if we feel comfortable enough, meaning myself, the client, and you as the bank feel comfortable with maybe it's just punch item list that they have to get done, or they're just waiting for something minor to happen, we can convert to like a shorter policy period and just get that paid out and be done with it. What tends to happen more times than not is we'll go into a second policy period and there's been holdups because of either weather or material has been scarce. And yep, exactly. I mean, a lot of things with, building a home or renovation could go wrong. So it tends that we end up paying for the second policy in full, and then we'll remit back whatever unused premium we don't have after that, if we're a little more open ended. But yeah, we've had a few with you guys where we've been able to switch it out to a smaller one, a shorter length policy. I mean,
Right. Can you think of any sort of scenario or a real life example you've had where the builder's risk policy really came through for a client where they weren't happy about paying for the builder's risk up front, but they had the claim really saved them?
so knock on wood, we've been pretty lucky so far. There hasn't been too many terrible ones. I will say this. I had one account go to a claim, and not that there was necessarily a payout from the insurance company, but what had happened was the insurance company had stepped in and it persuaded the builder that this is something that it would behoove them to take care of on their end without. upsetting the client even further. And the scenario was really this: the builder had a disgruntled employee, and without getting into too many details, it was basically found out that it was the builder's fault that this guy was mad. He would come in and ripped out a lot of copper in the house. Well, the claim adjuster came through and basically said it was on the builder's side, that this is something they would need to take care of. And through a few conversations with the insurance company and some of their team, it was taken care of by the builder. So it wasn't a straight play out, a very straightforward situation, but insurance company was able to step in on behalf of this client who was otherwise not really had much as far as representation unless he went out to seek legal representation, and was able to get it resolved without a cost of any more money. So so far so good. Like I said, knock on wood, we've been okay. So
That's great.
yeah.
Yeah, I've had a few scenarios where builder has left the structure uncovered and had torrential rains, caused water damage, a few fires. It really has. I mean, it's never clean when something like that happened, but at least they had the insurance company back them up. So because that would be something that would really kind of set people back, 6, 12, 18 months perhaps. And then the longer a property stays incomplete, the longer the possibility of having damage and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the insurance is certainly a big piece of that. We talked about what it covers. What about what it doesn't cover? What are some of those things that people should be thinking about to know that the insurance company doesn't have their back per se?
Yeah, I would say the biggest one that it's really hard for people to understand, or they think it gets covered from the builder, but the builder's risk is not going to cover for, I guess, shoddy work is the best way to put it. It just bad craftsmanship. You got to think about it too. I mean, there are some really good builders out there that stand by their work and they're meticulous even. But there's also a lot of guys that are out there that are looking at a spreadsheet and they're going to try and do it as cheap as possible, regardless of what they said. But that's a big one. That really is a big one. So even though they think they're progressing through it and they just did a terrible job as far as it, let's just say the drywall, like they didn't square everything up, the mudding on, the core, the joints are terrible. Shoddy
And yeah,
craftsman work. Yeah.
and that's one. Every once in a while, I have clients who I'm chatting with on a construction loan that could pay for it cash, and weirdly, or maybe not weirdly, they say, I want to get a construction loan because of the additional protections in place, protections of a title company collecting lien waivers from contractor and subcontractors, the inspections that a bank does to inspect. Now, I always tell clients, let me be clear, these are for our protection as the lender, but they get that added benefit, right? And so you have lien waiver collection, you have inspection, and the third big piece is that owner has the ability to sign or not sign an owner's authorization to release the funds to the contractor. The lender gets to, be the bad cop in the good cop, bad cop scenario. So they have the ability to hold off on that. And I always tell clients, especially when we're working with builders we've worked before, this builder's, we've had no issues with him. He's a great builder, but this is, your protection. Don't sign off on this until you're happy with the work, and make sure you're checking on that work. And then of course there are builders that have warranties. To your point, there's builders who have, they stand behind their work and don't. So you always want to check that warranty and make sure you fully understand how long that work is good for, and really that they stand behind their work as well. Let's wrap this up in terms of how clients can minimize claims or losses. So they come to you, they get their builder's risk insurance, but Obviously, there's things that they could be doing maybe before they start the project or maybe during the project to just really ensure that they're kind of minimize any sort of potential.
Yeah, great question. So first and foremost, like you had already mentioned, there's that layer of protection that the bank provides by going and getting a construction loan. I always think that's a great avenue for that. Even though it is for the bank, it doesn't matter. It's making the builder be honest. They have to follow the rules. They can't do what they want. So it's a benefit for the client. Also, it's also a pretty good vetting tool for the client. Maybe there has been a builder that they decide to go with. You find out about it, and you've had some issues in the past. It at least allows that client to have, I don't know, to go back and actually,
Feedback.
yeah, like, see if that's someone they really want to go with. So the first thing I was going to say is really vet the builder you're going with. I mean, obviously, dollars and cents is a big part of it, but you also want someone that's going to really do a good job because, again, major purchase. I would say in most cases, probably a forever home. If you're building it from the ground up, you're probably not moving anywhere. So you're going to want to like what they're putting in. As far as that, I would also state you want to ask that builder what kind of like risk mitigation they have in place for their construction sites. What type of people are they bringing in instead of you want to make sure you've got people that have worked for them forever. Um, they go through annual training if possible. It's not necessary, but always good to know that they're keeping up on latest practices. And then also, what are they doing to protect your investment, your home that they're building? So, by that, I mean, are they going to have proper lighting on the construction site? I don't know. I'm sure the bank may have something to say about that too, as far as working conditions. You want to make sure that the home is locked up, boarded up. If in most cases, I would say also a fence around the perimeter so people are not entering an active job site when they want. And then the last thing that I've been seeing more and more recently, and I think it's a good idea if you have the budget for, is installing a temporary security system, whether it be cameras or something like Simply Safe, just for that added layer of protection. Again, for people that are maybe being mischievous at nighttime and when they're not supposed to be there. So those are the biggest things to make sure you protect yourself during, or I should say, when you're entering your build. As far as during the build itself, I would say having some, besides the bank itself, I mean, have someone, either yourself or someone you trust, going to see the job site, do a walk with the foreman or the owner of the company, make sure things are up to your standards. Um, and like you're saying, hopefully some of that stuff, if you're able to catch it out of the corner of your eye, like if they're working on the roof and they don't cover it, I mean, that's a big water claim right there with damage to everything underneath it. So, uh, just being an active participant in that construction project, I would say is probably
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, you need to be making sure you're having those conversations on a regular basis with the builder stopping by. And yeah, most people, when they hire the builder they're working with, if they've spent a good number of months with them, so they've got a pretty good gut feel for them.
yeah,
But you just want to make sure that you're doing your due diligence.
right,
So,
right.
but this has been amazing. It's one of those necessary things with new builds, all builds, rehabs, etc. So I appreciate you breaking it all down for us and let us know about what's needed, what's not needed, and how to go about it.
Yeah, no problem, Ed. It's been a
All right,
pleasure.
thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
You have a good one.